everyone. Round of applause, please.
So I'm Avinash Rao. Thanks for the very complimentary introduction. The minute I walked in, I had the same exact thought that I had last time. The minute I saw Maran, I came in and Maran was there and said, "Hey, Avinash," and the first thing that went through my mind was, why am I such a boring guy, right? It's Saturday morning and I'm here with my black leather shoes and Maran's wearing, whatever he's wearing. And I've got this schoolboy haircut and he's got his, you know what I mean? And hopefully the talk won't be as boring. We're going to talk about accelerating scaling Agile using Scrum Bangalore. And the way I've structured it is, can you move this down a little bit? The heading isn't.
That's good.
So we're going to talk about the joys of Agile offshore, the problem statement that I'm going to talk about specifically in this session, defining the way that we've used Scrum and Scrum Bangalore, outcomes from both streams, and the work profile of the teams that actually did the work. And then there's a postscript where we accidentally did some pair programming. So I'll share the results of that as well. But before I get in, I really wanted to talk about one other person who's not very boring at all, and that was my Taekwondo sparring partner. So I was in London the last 3 years and I was learning Taekwondo. So the first day I walk into the class and there's just two older people, the rest are all teenagers or school kids, right? And there's two older people and so the Taekwondo instructor says, so both of you will be sparring partners. And this gentleman was a motorcycle mechanic. He's 40 years old, he's about a foot taller than I am. He's got dirty blonde hair in a ponytail, bulging biceps with tattoos, and the instructor says, now throw this guy on the floor. Throw this guy on the floor, you've got 15 minutes. So I spent the next 15 minutes trying to release myself from he was supposed to grab my neck and I was supposed to extricate myself and throw him down on the floor. And I spent the next 15 minutes struggling, and he could throw me down in a second actually, but it wasn't the best 15 minutes of my life, shall I say. And 15 minutes later, the instructor comes and says, you know what, people don't have muscles here under the arms. So he grabs you like this, then you pinch him under that, move him, trip him, and he goes down. And 30 minutes later, I'm doing exactly that, right? And the point I'm making is, this wasn't a hard work problem. I couldn't have worked harder and thrown him down on the floor. It was a technique problem, right? And a lot of things that I do in my work as an Agile coach everywhere and currently at Cognizant is to look at techniques, how we can improve things using techniques. Because too often, I think, especially offshore, using Agile, we've fallen into this mentality that it's a hard work problem. There are Agile teams which are working extraordinary amounts of work, extraordinary number of hours, and they have sleepless nights, and it doesn't feel very different from a typical waterfall project where project managers sat up all nights with their teams. How is Agile making it better, right? We need to move away from a hard work approach to a technique approach. And so full disclosure, I have very strong opinions about how we structure Agile teams offshore. Too many times I think what we've done, especially in services companies, for those of you who are from services companies, is that there's too much mini waterfalling. So inside an Agile, you take an Agile iteration and you mini waterfall inside that. And too many iterations are filled with big rocks, right? There's one big story and that's it, and we call it Agile. I also have a background in Lean and I look for data everywhere. So if my wife says you're not spending enough time with me, the first thing I do is Google it, right? So I'm that kind of a guy. So just to give you a full disclosure, right? That's the frame I come from. That's my frame of reference. Now, done something with that.
I'll handle that.
Okay, so too many offshore Scrum teams have this effort profile under pressure. So what happens is we start off a sprint and we do the analysis. In many cases we do some of the design, the low-level design at the beginning of the iteration. And then people start thinking we need to slog at the end, right? So why start now? I was on one team where people literally took their families out for dinners, they watched movies, day 4, day 5, because they knew that by day 7, things would get really hairy. And people didn't go home from day 8 to day 10. So at that point, they're all pulling all-nighters to deliver the committed scope. Throw in this thing that we call the pyramid offshore, where there's a constant pressure to bring in freshers, induct them into services agile teams, and then it makes a bit of a mockery of this whole agile concept of the team being flat, right? Because we kind of replicate the pyramid, we make many pyramids inside our Scrum teams. And there's also this thing about constant improvement productivity targets. To those who heard my talk last time, you'll remember that this is one of my favorite topics. You get me started on this and I'll go the next 30 minutes on that, which is that the way we sell offshore services in particular continues to be, we'll give you 10% every year in cost reduction. And how does that translate? How do we translate that into our development teams? We say get in more freshers, pyramid adjustments, things like that. Many of which are working against succeeding using Agile. Okay, so my problem statement, what I want to do is to be effective in an imperfect world where clients are demanding effectiveness, which is why we're doing Agile, right? But what they want to do is they want to pay for efficiency. Here's your rate card, can we get a 10% discount every year, etc. And at the same time, what we want to do is increase throughput while preserving the team's long-term effectiveness. We don't want teams to burn out. I was on one particular program where we were doing great Agile, then we moved to Scrum Fall, where people were so burnt out after 18 months that they just didn't care. I mean, the client can, and the management can say what they want, but they were just too tired, and we don't want that. Okay, so one of the joys really after having worked on site is that you come offshore and you say, you know what, this is what I want to do, and you tell the team 1, you're going to do Scrum, team 2, you're going to do Scrum Bar, and they say yes, and they say okay, right, you can actually do that, because you're sitting on site and you tell the teams to do something and they say, it's not quite as easy. Anyway, so the way we set up our Scrum team was fairly traditional. We have a sized backlog. We had 2-week iterations with LLD, development, integration, BOD readiness. We moved from a previous release where we were doing waterfall, and we loaded the team with as much scope as a waterfall team would have taken in 2 weeks, right? But the waterfall team would not have made the code production ready. But here, the ask from the team was to take as much scope as they would in waterfall, but with testing and readiness included. It came to about 29 function points for 2 weeks, which is 16 hours per function point. Now, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, why do you measure everything in function points, right? And like I said in the disclosure right in the beginning, I have a need to measure everything. You'll see in one of the latest slides that was the team happy with the work that they did. So I tried to put a measurement against that and say, how do we measure if the team is happy? So they picked up scope, which was 29 function points. And for the Scrum Barn team, what we did was we set up a backlog. We used e-post-it tool, which helped us do that. And each person picks up a task, completes it, and moves on to the next item. We set an initial scope of 25 function points, which was one person taking on one item and completing it. But we didn't really say that we will complete the scope to be delivered a priori. We didn't say that this is exactly what we will deliver at the end of 2 weeks. Many of our planning stand-ups, other ceremonies remain the same. We also had additional update. We updated the Scrum Barn board twice a day, once at 11, once at 4, to make sure that we know what's happening. Okay, we used, in terms of tooling, we used a e-post-it tool. For Scrum, the posts had a due date because we said it will take us about 2 days to do the NLD, 3 days in order to do the development, etc. Then the Scrum branches move at actuals, and when complete, developer picks up the next task. Right? Okay, so the results. Yeah, covered this, so I'll skip this slide. Okay, so here's what we saw from our Scrum team, right? And I want to spend a little bit of time on this slide. This is the output from the tool that we used, but rather than going to all the details, what I want to focus on is this line right here, this blue line. So this really says these are the items in our iteration that move to complete. So when did these items complete in the life cycle of the iteration? So if you really see what happened, people started working, this was a setup task. Then right at the end, once you finished testing everything moved to complete towards the end of the iteration, almost on the last day or the second last day. Make sense? Now let's take a look at what happened in our Scrum team. So this is a very different profile where people started completing tasks right through. And in a later slide, I'll show you what they did once they finished a task. Right? So in here, you finish a task, move it to complete, pick up the next task, move it through. And this gives us a very different output profile as to when things complete in the life cycle of an iteration. Now, in terms of comparing the outputs, the Scrum team completed 25 function points in 7 days versus 29 function points for 10 days for the Scrum team. So lower is better here. So the output productivity is 13.4 hours per function point versus 16 hours per function points. The Scrum team then picked up an additional 10 function points worth of work, which they completed in 2 weeks. There were other items that were partially done, which we got credit for in the next iteration. Right? So this, I think, gave us a way out from this big rock problem where we had the Scrum team taking large pieces which they finished, moved to complete, and then basically didn't have the structure to pick up something else to do. Because if you look at this is our analysis of how much time people spent on core, incidental and non-value add activities. This is from Lean, which basically says that anything you work on that is directly adding value to the customer, that is core. And what you'll see that people spend a lot of time on the core items in the beginning, and towards the end it drops down. Which kind of makes sense. This is incidentals and this is non-value add items. But if you look at what happens to the effort profile of the teams that are doing Scrum that has a rather different effort profile. This one's an aberration because we had a network outage. That's why you see the NVA going high on that day. But here, when people complete their task, their core task, their time spent on the core doesn't go down because they pick up an additional task which can then be delivered to the customer. Right? So, effect of structure on team dynamics. One of the questions that always comes up is, so you do Scrum but aren't you taking away a lot of the interaction time? Isn't that what you're losing in the whole process? Because Scrum gives people the ability to collaborate, and by forcing people to take up additional tasks, don't you really lose that? And one of my arguments is that, let me cover this and I'll get to that later. Because the team did not size, I did find that there was less discussion cross-group on the items. And I want to put that out there. Because what we did see is that people were more focused on their individual tasks. When I walked into the Scrum, the daily stand-ups, right? People were thinking more about, okay, so this is my item, rather than this is our item. So that is a consequence, and I want to put that out there. There was, however, much better leveling, and this may be a services company thing, because if you have a stand-up or a planning meeting or a retrospective, people tend to defer to hierarchy, that there's a senior associate versus a junior associate, and we saw a little less of that in Scrum Ban because everyone's more focused on their tasks and they're less likely to influence how things are happening in other places with other people. What it also did was that because we stood up in front of this screen where we said, here's a chit, here's your chit, how is it moving, it exposed weak people very, very ruthlessly, because we were all standing as a team in front of the board and we could all make out very clearly which chits were moving and which chits weren't moving. So the good news here is that it enabled us to give help, but at the same time, we do need to think about, if we have a culture where everyone's focused on their chits, how do we get people the help that they need in order to succeed? Okay, so, cool. So this one really means the movie hasn't ended yet, because there was a bit of a postscript. What happened was that we had a third team that was starting, and we lost access to network credentials. There were some that expired, right? So I said, as the coach, I called the team and they said, thinking to myself that I'm making a virtue out of a necessity, I said, we will try this new thing. It's called, I'm sure you've heard of it. It's called pair programming, right? Because we've got just 2 credentials. So you two do this, you two do this, work on it together. It's supposed to be great. And then I haven't been a big fan of pair programming, to be honest. I mean, I've never really worked on it and I've never tried too much. So I ignored them, I'll be honest. I know I'm on video, but I ignored them. And they picked up a scope of 25 function points, but then at the end of day 3 of their designated 2-week time period, they came and said, Avinash, we need to meet you. I said, okay, what happened? I'm sure nothing's been done because, all that. They finished their 25 function points in 3 days. So what the Scrum Ban team did in 7 days, the pair programming team did in 3 days. The team then got really cocky, overconfident, and they said, we're going to change the rules of the game. We're going to take up this really big chunk of functionality and we're going to keep going till we deliver it. So in 13 days, they took an item that was 76 function points and delivered it end-to-end, production ready, tested, POD done. And this was a really complex piece of functionality. Sometimes the function points don't give you a sense of how complex the work is, right? It's supposed to, but doesn't always. But they picked it up and they did it. And it was, you could see that this was a completely high-performing unit. They were together, very visible camaraderie. Now, clearly you would think that at this point I'd be saying, let's move everybody to pair programming, right? Yeah, but I just want to put a few caveats in there. So what happened is that by week 2, people started complaining of overheads. What they're saying is, we love pair programming, right? We're doing a great deal of stuff together. We enjoy working in this manner. But you, Avinash, my manager, the company we work for, is imposing too many overheads on us. You're asking us to attend meetings, you want status reports, there's too much email that we need to respond to, bunch of stuff. So what they're saying is that pair programming is great, it works really well, but it works in a context where they don't want to be disturbed. They're saying, you give us this bit of functionality, let's go away, let's run with it, let's finish it, let's give it back to you. Don't burden us with a lot of stuff that actually lead to a lack of focus or a decrease in focus on the work items that we are working on. And that's something that I'm thinking about. I haven't solved this problem, but we're thinking of ways in which we can improve or actually use this, but we'll have to create an environment where we put less overhead on people. That's the only way this will work, because under duress, right, these people couldn't have sat at their individual workstations, so they couldn't have checked their email, etc. Because of the outage. So they were forced to use one machine, two people using one machine, which significantly cut down email time. But what happened is that over 1 week, they came and said, I have 300, 100 emails that I haven't responded to. I'm not going to check them at home because we don't let them, essentially. These are desktop users. So the results were great. We haven't just found a way to replicate them at a large scale. Okay, so this is probably my final slide. Yes. So I went back to the teams and I said, Scrum Ban, pair programming teams, how have you done? What's your feedback? And everybody looked at me and said, yeah, it was good. So I asked somebody who's closer to the team's median age, right? And she's a much nicer person than I am, who went and spoke to the teams and gathered feedback. We asked people on 5 parameters. Do you think this iteration was effective? Did you have fun? Did you enjoy working on it? Did you feel connected to your team, etc.? And what we found was that Scrum teams reported being a closer unit much more than the Scrum Ban teams. The hierarchy got in the way of Scrum teams much more than Scrum Ban teams though, because in a Scrum teams you sit down, you have your planning meetings, your retrospectives, and the senior people tend to get deferred to. We have not sorted that out yet. The culture still is, it's a pyramid, he's my manager, he's a senior associate, etc. We're working on that. Pair programming is fun, but please don't send me so many meeting requests and emails, etc. The real, for me, the last thing is the key, because at the end of the whole exercise, right, when we started planning for the next set of iterations, the leads came to me and said, now I want to set up my own board. I want to use Scrum Ban. I want to make it happen. Okay, so opening it up for questions.
It's not a question. Can you go back to the observations?
Yes.
Okay. The hierarchy got in the way.
Yes.
As we know, seniors always influence the juniors.
Yes.
What we did in my previous organization is, I am the principal engineer.
Yes.
Everyone looks at me.
Yes.
And I am the Scrum Master.
Okay.
Okay. So what I did is, I did not go for planning meeting.
You did not go to the planning meeting. Okay.
Sprint planning.
Yes.
Now they are forced to do it by themselves.
Yes. Was it effective?
Yes.
It was.
It was not effective on the first sprint.
Yes.
Second sprint, third sprint, they realized I am not going to help.
Yes.
Then they started it.
Yes.
So we need to give some time for that. At the same time, you need to have confidence that they will do it.
Yes.
You just force it. By you are not there. So
Yes.
now there is no one to look after or no one to question them. Now they need to question themselves to understand what it is.
And this statement may be more true of services companies, but for too long we've rewarded people for being indispensable, for being the person to look up to, etc.
Okay, that's the...
And so even if I leave them, there may be a few people who will
come back.
Come back, because in the past they've been rewarded for that behavior.
Yes.
It's a surprising thing, but I like trainees and people who've not had that much past waterfall experience, because we've sometimes not trained them incorrectly, right? And it's often easier to bring them into Agile than it is more experienced.
Slide initially when you were doing the Scrum Ban, you mentioned that it's not estimated but somewhat
Yes.
Yeah, so I thought you mentioned that you have a function point of sizing.
Yes.
But when you're talking about Scrum Ban, you're saying that you didn't estimate the task. What was the approach out there?
Good question. So the thing is, everybody isn't a function point counter. So the function point count is done by some of the people in the team, right? So we do that on an ongoing basis for all the work. So in a sense, we have a sizing, but what we normally do in a Scrum team is that we get the team together and ask them to estimate, in addition to function points. But for the Scrum Barn teams, we do not do that. We say, here are the items. They don't necessarily care how many function points.
It's more of a work unit that they're.
Exactly. So there's just a prioritized backlog and we pull from that.
If I can ask one more, please. Since you meant that you have an high-level sizing in terms of functional point,
Yes.
that's what I'm understanding.
Yes.
For the Scrum team, what was the approach? They went into story point, or they still went into a granular functional point in this case?
No, they did t-shirt size.
T-shirt size.
Yeah, thought it was an interesting start where you said that you see teams burn out in Scrum over 18 months. You know, we see it all the time coming from the other side of the fence. It's very hard to get people to work 9 till 5 in India. But what I found interesting was that Scrum Ban, you saw that become more sustainable, because my experience of Scrum Ban is that it's very relentless and you pushing things through very fast, and that can tire people out much more quickly, I found, than Scrum. So it's interesting. Is that something you've seen yet, or too early to say?
So what people were frustrated by, they didn't necessarily get frustrated by the amount of spent their time working, but they were frustrated by the amount of time they spent in office. And the two are only loosely correlated sometimes. There is a huge amount of wait time as well as waste time that is often built into many of our projects, right? Even if you're doing Scrum, if there is wait time and waste time, that frustrates people more than this is the work assigned to you, especially if there's a WIP of 1, a work in progress limit of 1, where everyone's given one task. If there's a WIP of 1, I haven't seen people get tired. When I go to new projects and I say we should do Scrum Ban, this is a question I often get back. I said, you're going to burn out our teams because you're going to make them work too hard. And my, oops, is it gone? Okay. And my response is, you know the curve that I showed, that I put up in the beginning?
Yeah.
That's what kills people. That's what really kills people, where there is this notion that the end of every sprint will be a nightmare.
Yeah, the problem is I've seen teams, you know, your curve where it was at the top, they stay at the top throughout because there's no lull whatsoever in Scrum Ban.
In Scrum
And we've
Ban.
had to build in purpose breaks from Scrum Ban
Okay.
in order to sustain the team and add kind of gaps for training. And,
Right. How long was this over a period of?
6 months maybe.
Over 6 months. So
Yeah.
I'll keep that in mind,
Yeah.
and I'll see. That's something for me to consider. If over 6 to 8 months, if I start seeing that, then
Put in a break.
put a break in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Scrum Ban is something like for me, I have heard first time.
Okay.
I have heard Kanban or
Yes.
Scrum. So what's the difference here between Kanban and Scrum Ban, and what's the difference between normal Scrum and the Scrum Ban?
Yes. So if you look at Kanban, really, it's about, but as soon as it's about pull. The minute that you have capacity to work on something, you just pull it in. It started with Toyota and some other companies using a chit called Kanban, right? You put it in and you get
Continuous
filled in.
process like.
Exactly. It's to increase the flow through your process. And a lot of companies that I work for and with are under pressure to show an improvement a constant improvement in throughput. So Scrum Ban is a technique where you're using some concepts from Kanban to really bring that into Scrum or merge it with Scrum to create that flow, to create that throughput. And like he said, it can be intense because there's a constant stream of work going through. Typically, you will see, and we got about 16% improvement with that. You will see a greater throughput using these techniques than with the Scrum. The problem with Scrum is too often, I'm not saying it's a Scrum problem, it's the way we implement Scrum, is that you have a big rock, it takes 8 days, in a 15-day cycle, and the guy picks up just that and nothing else in that iteration. Because again, the way we have done it, right, we want to be very sure that we deliver what we done. So there's a lot of gaps inside. to give you an analogy, you take a large glass bowl, you put 3 big rocks in it and it seems full, but there's actually a lot of space.
Also, one more thing is, in terms of Kanban, from a traditional role like waterfall, you won't feel much difference when it comes to the execution. In waterfall also we have design, development, code, testing.
Yeah.
In Kanban also we have that, what is that?
You have the various stages,
Yeah,
right?
stages.
Yeah.
That's like, you can have any number of stages. There is no limit that you need to do this only. So when it combines with the Scrum, which is a little bit of process oriented, where it is like defined time box,
Yeah.
it gives a complete flavor of new flavor, where team will not feel that they are in a different one, but they are in Agile. That's the main motto. It facilitates in a lot of services company where they need to see the reports, where we are at this point. In Scrum we don't see that where we are. At the end, have you finished it or not?
Correct. Correct. It is.
One point, I agree with you. The WIP definition come out very value for quality, VFQ or value for stream mapping.
Yes.
From my personal experience, I've seen that.
Yes.
When you start, we literally struggle to put that in place because we normally, from our tendency, put it on the higher side to increase the throughput. That's our tendency from offshore, I would say.
Yes.
That is. But once you hit the optimum result, that's probably what he's saying, right? You get into a constant. I've seen my CFD shifting.
Yes.
Yeah, you have.
Yes.
Sorry, is this a full Indian team or is it a distributed?
No, this is a full Indian team.
Okay. And it's a physical Kanban board you're using?
No,
Rather than a tool?
it's an e-tool,
Oh,
but we do that for convenience. It could very well have been a physical board.
What was the kind of work involved? It was pure development or
Product development.
Product.
NPD.
And I mean, what I see, the big rock was the main reason due to procrastination of work, or was it any dependencies for environment and various things? So was cycle time kind of analysis done to really find out? Yeah.
Excellent question. It was not based on dependencies.
Okay.
I don't say that it's because of procrastination either. I think it's more people want to be very confident that they will hit their commitments. And that's the reason they take a big rock, put it in and say, you know what, now this time box is full with that big rock. But actually there is enough time there. But dependencies are handled differently because no matter which technique we use, if there's a dependency, it must be met. Otherwise, there's not too much you can do about it.
Questions on this estimation,
Yes.
size estimation, we
Yes.
use function points.
Yes.
And function points require a certain level of competency to do that.
Yes.
Now, and Scrum basically suggests the story points estimation.
Yes.
So, what was the basis of you to use the function points and why not story points and what is the benefit?
Yes. So story points are a construct of that team, right? And so this is me. This is all me because I have worked with function points for many years, and I want to be able to benchmark what we do against. Are we good? Is 16 hours per function point? It's a fairly reasonable productivity. I wanted to be able to do that external benchmarking, which I would not have been able to do with story points. And I agree with you completely, it does require specialist knowledge, which is why that there's typically a few people as a group that does the sizing in function points. Not everyone can do it. It's not a perfect thing, but it's more a reflection of how I chose to set up some
So
of
that is because you are comfortable and you have good experience of doing function points. Now, if you have to suggest to a new team, would they consider as it as an overhead?
That's a good question. If you want to do external benchmarking, where you have to answer a customer's question that says, prove to me that you are best in class, best in the industry, best against my other vendor, whatever. If you're doing those external benchmarking, function points help. If you want to do an internal tracking or an internal measurement, then story points is great.
Because the topic is scaled agilism.
Yes.
When multiple teams are involved.
Yes.
So, I mean, if if you are really running a Scrum,
Yes.
integration of all those things become more complex, right? You wouldn't have a Scrum of Scrum.
That's an interesting question. With Scrumban, and this is my personal experience, is that you can change this or increase the size of the team itself more easily than if you do Scrum.
You haven't got the same communication links. The communication is not strong. So in Scrum you don't really want more than kind of nine players.
Exactly.
In Scrumban you haven't got that limitation.
Yes. You can do a team of 14 or 15, which I would never even attempt in Scrum.
We have attempted it.
You attempted
Yeah.
it? It does work?
It works if the team knows what they are doing.
Yes.
Otherwise,
Okay.
it does not. It becomes a noise.
It fragments.
Yes,
is
it becomes
my.
noise. We have gone till 16,
Okay.
and then we split into two.
Okay.
Because then what we did is based on the feature
Yes.
or the function area where we
Yeah.
are doing, we split it into two, and then people like Scrum Masters meet once in a while and.
And that did. Okay. Cool.
I have a question. When you were saying that your team had 24 function points, and because of some outage or something, they did the pair programming, and you found that they did in 5.7 hours per person.
Per function point.
Yeah. How did you come into that matrix? Because when we are estimating to the story points, relative sizing of the hours and all, somewhat I understand, but I'm not understanding that.
Is there a mark?
Yeah, there is.
So we had 10 days into 8 into, we are a team of 6, let's say. So that gives us a certain number, and then you just divide that by the number of function points, right? So this gives you the amount of time the Scrum team took, and divided by the number of function points they took, which gave us a productivity of 16 hours per function point. And in the case of the paired programming, they spent 3 days into 8, a team of 6 divided by 25, which is what gave us the productivity of 5.6.
Here is my second question.
Yes.
So when you are saying per function points,
Yes.
I as an individual, I don't know what is a FP. I know what is an SP, story point. So this per function point, suppose I'm a member of your Scrum One team, how should I give you the function points? Means I'm not understanding. Suppose one story you have showed me.
Yes.
I understand the outcome of the story.
Yes.
How should I estimate that if you are putting me into this model?
That's where we tell people don't estimate. Here's your prioritized backlog. Pick up the first item. You have a work in process limit of 1. So pick it up, start working on it, finish it, complete it, move on to the next one.
So when I'm saying that I have week of 1,
Yeah.
okay, so like you have 6 members.
Yes.
So week 1, total 6 weeks and 1 week. So if that is a model, then how am I understanding that why I am having the bottleneck in that 2 weeks of timeline?
That's a good question, but we handle that differently, right? So, okay. So we have a core team, and this is moving away from some of the things that I've spoken about, but to respond to your question, we have our different Scrum teams or Scrumban teams that work here. But there is a core team, which is some of the senior architects, some of the other people who look at the overall flow in terms of dependencies, in terms of what linkages are needed. So we have abstracted out some of those from the Scrum teams or the Scrumban teams into a team which is quote unquote overhead. But they take care of the overheads in terms of dependencies and in aligning the prioritized backlog. Because the prioritized backlog would very well have an item which has a dependency on something else, but that's not the team's problem, that's the core team's problem.
I have two questions. One is
Sure.
you said that your team updates the Scrum on most twice a day.
Yes.
So are they really happy to update it twice in a day? And my second question is like you said that when you do a stand-up meeting, you said that it exposes the weak team members. When you say someone you are weak out of the whole team, how personally do they take that and weak? And
excellent questions.
I'm up, guys.
I thought I had 5 minutes. I didn't see the 5-minute card. Can I respond to this?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, always looking for technicalities. Anyway, it's actually worse than that. I'm responding to your second question first. When you are all standing in a group, looking at the chits, and you see one of them isn't moving, you don't have to tell the person that they're not performing. It becomes very apparent. I mean, it's rather embarrassing, but it's very embarrassing on that person. It's a tough situation, but you don't have to tell that person. It becomes very clear. Everybody can see it, and typically those people ask for help or we offer them help. So we haven't had the problem where people get defensive, because as a group you can just see that it's not. So it becomes very apparent. And your first question, can you say that again?
You said you heard your take about twice moving.
Oh, I didn't give them a choice. Some of the joys of Agile offshore, right? Don't say it's twice a day. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, but I guess I was addicted to it.
And then you call that boundary, right?
So I probably shouldn't be saying this on camera again, but at one point I did an experiment where they say it was a new team, they were doing this for the first time, and I said, mail me, okay, twice a day, everything you've done since the morning. Okay? Okay? That's extreme, right? Because that put, what also happened, and I had just come back from the UK at that time, my team in the UK wouldn't have had as big a problem with that. Because, but the team in India really had a problem with that. Because they said, they felt a lot of pressure even where they justifiably couldn't have done something, right? They found it very difficult to send me a blank document. So I quickly changed my approach. In the UK they would have sent me a black document or given me a reason, and they would have been fine with that, but not in India. That's probably too high pressure. Okay? Alright, thank you.